Now, again, to quickly go through. Now, when you have a private network in AWS, that's what we call it as VPC. And in the VPC, what is that we are going to have? We'll be having an internet gateway, and the purpose of the internet gateway is to help us to communicate between the instances and the internet. So that is how it is going to act as a gateway to communicate between the internet and the resources. And then every time when you create an account, you'll be getting a default VPC, and in that VPC, you will also be getting an internet gateway. And then when the traffic comes from the internet through internet gateway, the next component that it reaches is the routing table or route table, where it is nothing but the list of IP addresses of all our machines that we are going to have, so that based on the traffic that you are going to get, it will be redirecting exactly to some particular machine or the resources. So that has all the details and the route on if this traffic comes, this is how you should be passing it on. So based on your requirement, it will be passing it to a specific route. And then we have the network access control, which is nothing but the firewall, where you will be setting up the rules based on what is the inbound rule, which means from the machine, if you want to talk to the internet, what kind of rule that you have to set, or from the internet, if you have to connect to the machine or to talk to the machine, what kind of rule that you will put will be specified on the outbound and inbound rule. So that's what we saw. And talking about it, there's one more component that we need to know is subnetwork or subnet. So a subnet is again a part of your network, where it is again considered as one small section of the network. And what exactly that you're going to do? Now, when you're storing everything in your network under VPC, because when you say VPC, it is a private network. And in that, further, if you want, you can group them into specific subsection called subnet. And you can put all the specific resources that you want into it. So that's what the example that I was saying yesterday. If you want to compare the internet service provider as the global one, and in that, in our house, if you can consider it as a subnet, where within our house, whatever we have, only we can connect. And again, from this, if you want, you can connect to the internet as the global network. So that's how a subnet is nothing but a part of your network where you will be having one specific resource. And whenever we are trying to create a subnet, it has to be in a particular availability zone only. And for every availability zone, which is nothing but a data center, we can have more than one subnet. So that is how in one data center, you can have many machines and you can form small group for that machines. The same concept is here. In an availability zone, you will be having all the EC2 machines. If you need, you can group certain EC2 machines and create one subnet. Okay. And then when you say a subnet should be available only in a availability zone. It should not be available, or it cannot be available across two availability zone, because when you say you have a machine, it will be part of one data center only. It cannot go to the other data center. Same concept is with the subnet. Okay. And as we create the default VPC, and along with the default VPC, we will also be getting a subnet. So you will be getting everything when you create a default VPC. You will be getting the internet gateway, you will be getting the route table, and you'll also be getting the Knakal, and also you'll be getting the subnet. Okay. Then, now, what is the purpose of the subnet? So if you say subnet, from the internet gateway, when the traffic comes to the route table, from the route table, it will be going to a particular machine. That is what I was trying to explain. But where exactly the machine is now available? If you look, it is not directly in the availability zone, but in the availability zone, you are going to make some small groups called as subnets, and inside that the machines will be there. So that is how the subnet, whatever that we are going to create, should be associated with the route table, so that if a traffic is coming, it will know that this is the subnet in which your machine is there, so go and talk to that. Okay, so depending on your need, you can divide into different subnet. And when you're having a subnet, you can have a public subnet and a private subnet. What is the difference? Now, a public subnet has a route to the internet. So only when you create a subnet as public, then all the machines that you're going to put into it will be able to connect to the internet. The same subnet, if you create it as a private subnet, then the resources inside it doesn't know how to connect to the internet because you will not be having any route. So you can consider it this way. In your organization, if you're creating a lab, in that lab, let's say that you have 2 floors which you have used for storing all the machines. Now, this is the replacement of availability zone. Availability zone means you have machines in a data center. The same thing I'm just trying to compare with an example in an organization. And in that, now if you have 2 floors, what you can do is you can try to create one subnet, that is one group of network for all the machines in the first floor, and you can create one group of machines in the second floor and create a subnet. So that is how both of them are in your company's network. That is the VPC, wherein internally you can create small groups which is dependent on a specific reason where you'll be grouping all the machines under it. So that is how when you're trying to create it, from the root table, you will be redirecting the saying that this is the exact subnet in your availability zone where the machine is. Okay, so that's how even when you're trying to connect in your organization, it will be like, okay, my data center is this location, and in this on the first floor under this subnet, it is there. So that's how you'll be accessing it exactly. And in that, if you create the subnet as a public subnet, then the machines inside it can connect to the internet. And in case if you create it as a private one, then it will not be able to connect. Okay. So this is the same explanation what I gave, wherein now within the availability zone, you can have many subnet where you can have a subnet which is public or private. Both of them is possible. But in that, now, if you keep something as a public, then it can talk to the internet. In case if you make the subnet as private, then it will not be able to communicate to the internet, but it can communicate between each other. Okay, so that's how you can communicate between each other. But again, every subnet has to be associated to the route table, right? Because without the route table, you will not be knowing. So internally, when you are making the subnet as public, then that subnet will not be actually associated with the internet gateway. So that is how it can directly communicate only between the machines. So for that, you need to have a routing table. So if you have a routing table, you can connect between the machines, but only if the routing table is attached to the internet gateway, then you can try to connect to the internet gateway through this route. Okay. Getting it? So finally comes the part, what exactly is this availability zone? Okay, so a simple example what I gave is, it is just like a replacement for your actual data center that you will be having in your organization or the lab. So that way, in terms of AWS, availability zone is nothing but a distinct location. Distinct means it is a separate and a unique location where you are going to actually create all the instances. So whatever the instances that you're going to create will all be present in one availability zone only. Okay. And by creating an instance, what will happen? We will be able to protect our application specifically in that location, because whatever location that you're interested to work in, that we will be having a region. Correct? A region is nothing but a location where you will be having more than one availability zone, and in that, whatever machine that you're going to create will be exactly available. So it's just a replacement for our data center. Okay. availability zone are the one where everything is going to be stored. In fact, if you see the Amazon, wherever they are going to store it, we call it as availability zone. Internally, that is also a lab or a data center where they are storing all the machines. From that, if we create a new machine, we will be able to access. Okay. So now, if you look, the major advantage of why we are going with availability zone is the high availability. Because now when you're creating a architecture for your system in such a way that your system is always available, because now the same thing, if we go with our physical machine, what will happen? If one machine goes down, you have to think about setting up as a backup on another one. Whereas in the availability zone, there will be many machines. In case if one goes down or some problem, you can access the other one. Or in case if your availability zone itself is having another big problem, then within the region you can choose another availability zone automatically. So that's how we'll not be having a problem, and we'll ensure that our system is always available, and we can ensure the concept called high availability, which means whenever we need, it'll be available. Okay. And another biggest advantages is the fault tolerant, wherein if something goes wrong, as I said, we can always take a reference of another instance which is available in the same availability zone. So that's how there will always be a backup available for our server from which we can run all the application in case one machine goes down. So we don't have to worry about fixing everything, because if we have machines in our premises, we have to fix it. But now when you're using the AWS service and creating a machine, it will be available on the availability zone, and in case if something goes wrong, it will be repaired by itself, wherein there are people from the AWS side who are going to help us to fix it immediately, and we don't have to worry about it. So that's when, by going with the concept of availability zone, we'll be able to make sure that high availability is available, as well as the fault tolerant, to make sure the backup is always available. Getting it? So let's try to just go through that the same in AWS, because what we've been seeing is only theory. To understand, now if you go to the AWS login console, now if you go to the services, what we first saw is this compute section under which we had the EC2. But now all those things, whatever I'm talking about, is specifically on the network, right? So if you come to the networking content, and then under that you will be seeing the VPC. So if you click on the VPC, it is going to show you the VPC dashboard, and in that you'll be having all the details about whatever that we are talking. That is the details on your VPC, which is virtual private cloud, and then you'll be having details on the internet gateway, you'll be having the details on the route table, you will be having details on the Knakal, you'll be having the details on Subnet. Everything will be available here. Okay, so in case if you want to create a new VPC in addition to what you have got by default when you created the account, then you will be going ahead with the start VPC, and you are going to give the details. Okay, so how many subnets that you want in that, what kind of subnet that you want, whether it is a public or a private subnet. So depending on that, you're going to create your own. But if not, you can make use of the standard or the default VPC which has been assigned to you when we create the account. So when you create a AWS account, we will be assigned a default VPC which we can use. Now, if you want to look at the internet gateway, either you can come here and choose on the left option, or you can directly go to this particular internet gateway. So now here you can say that it is already showing us one internet gateway and one VPC. So if you go under this, this is the default VPC which we have been using so far. Okay, so that gives you complete details on what is the default VPC, and this default VPC, what is the default route table it is using it, and also what is the default Knakal that it is trying to use. Okay, so like that, it is going to give you all the details about this, because if you remember, when I said that you're going to create an account, you're going to get a default VPC and also internet gateway and a route table, as well as you'll be getting a specific Knakal. So that is how all those things, whatever that you're seeing, is attached to the default VPC. Same way, if you go back and now if you want to look at the internet gateway, this internet gateway is the default one, correct? So if you want to create a new internet gateway, you can go ahead and click on create new gateway and give a name for it. Let's call it as test IGW, test internet gateway. Okay, what's there? Okay, we have to first create the ID and then come up here over here, but pretty much remove this and now create. Okay, so now it has created a new gateway, and here if you go, you can change the details or what configurations that you want to set. You can try to set it up over here based on how it has to take. Suppose if you do not want to use a standard one, you can attach your own VPC, and from that VPC you can create your own internet gateway. In case if you do not want, you can go ahead and delete them. Okay, okay, so now here you can see I'm not able to delete this, because if you go back in the last session, I said if you have attached the internet gateway to some kind of resource, then you'll not be able to use it. So that way it is being attached to the VPC, and that's why it is being used. So it is not able to use it. So make sure that first you detach the VPC, as you can see here, then you'll be able to go ahead and delete. If not, you'll not be able to delete. Okay, so that's how you choose either to use a default internet gateway or to delete something specifically. Okay, it has been accessed by something else and it will not be deleted. Okay, same way, if you want to see on the route table, if you see here, there is already one default route table available, and in addition to this, if you want to create something new, you can specify. So here it is going to give what and all are the routes or the rules that we have. As of now, we have only one machine that has been attached, and it's saying that this is the destination, how it has to access. And for that, is there any subnet which has been attached? Yes, when you create a VPC, it will also be creating a default subnet, and that is what we have been attached to it. Suppose if you want, you can create a new route table. Again, for that, you have to give a name. And if you see here, it is showing you what is the VPC that you want to attach it to, like this. Now, this is the only VPC that we have, that is the default one. Suppose if you have created more VPC, then it will be showing all those things so that you can choose whatever the particular route table that you're creating as part of which VPC it has to be. Okay, so I've created here, and you can apply the same kind of routes to this also. So depending on your need, you can create and you can attach, and if you don't want, you can try to delete it. Okay, now same thing, if you want to go to Knakal, now in the Knakal, once again, this is the default Knakal that we have, but if you need, I can add one more Knakal and specify what are the rules that we want. So depending on the rules, here you can see, you can set what kind of inbound rules that you need and what kind of outbound rules that you want to set. So just go ahead and create an Knakal, and you can create a specific rule. Now in that, if you come to the inbound rule, then if you remember, I said whenever you are defining a rule in the Knakal, it will be taking it by the numbers. right? That is from the lowest to highest. And in that case, now whatever the rule that you want to define that is specifically based on inbound or outbound, you're going to define. So here there is a common rule which says allow all the traffic from all the port. Okay, so you're going to specify whether you want to allow it or not and what kind of traffic that you want to allow it or not. And the rule number star means it is the default one. Suppose if you want to add a new rule, you can click on this, okay, and add another rule, and you can give some number for this. Let's say I give a number called 80, and what kind of rule that you want to apply based on what kind of protocol. Let's say I want to apply it for HTTP, which means on this particular machine, wherever a machine that you're going to use, and in that, if you're trying to apply this rule based on this test Knakal that we have created, then it will allow only those kind of traffic to connect to the machine and outside the machine. So is there any change in the protocol, or the port number by default is 80, so you're going to keep it as it is, and you're going to specify what is the machine to which you need to connect. So again, the source will be the IP address. If not, on your local test machine that you want, you will specify this way. Okay, and whether you want to allow or deny, you can specify that, and then go ahead and keep adding rules like this. Suppose if I want to add one more rule, then I can say 90, and that is the number of the rule, and then what kind of rule, again if it is something else, I can specify that, and what is the protocol, and what is the machine to which it has to be applicated. And now do you want to whether allow it or deny? Depending on your rule, you will be saying what kind of the traffic should be going inside this machine is using this, and outbound means from the machine whatever the traffic is going outside to the internet, then you will specify those rules here. So depending on your need, you will specify the new Knakal, or on the existing Knakal you can update it. Okay, same way on the subnet also. So if you go to the subnet, now by default there is one subnet that we are going to be using it, and in case if you want to create a new subnet, you'll click on the new subnet and give the name whatever that you want. Okay, and that subnet, to what VPC you need to attach, again we are using the default VPC, then you can specify that. Yeah, so this is not a specific machine, so it is not able to create a subnet. But anyways, now these are the things, you have to focus more from the networking side. But other than that, I'm just trying to help you with understanding. So if you say there is some problem, or if you're trying to understand, you should know that within your VPC, you'll be having one more component called as subnet, where you're going to group all the machines here. So specify a particular availability zone, and based on that, you will be giving a particular machine that this subnet should be part of it. Okay, so that's how you'll be specifying exactly what is the subnet that you want to create. So primarily, this is where using this sections that you have, you're going to define your complete network on how the internet gateway should be there, how the routing table should be there, what and all values should it pass, and then what kind of rule that you're going to apply. Everything will be specified here. Okay. Now, here, when you're actually working, what will happen is, in the organization, not everyone will be creating an account, right? Because now, for our practice, we are going to create one AWS account. But in an organization, when there are many users, like thousands of users are going to use, then you cannot ask them to create a separate account and give the username and password and give a specific payment. All those kind of things will not happen. So that is when generally we will be using something called as IAM, which stands for identity and access management. And yeah, as I was saying, now it will not be possible for creating account for everyone, wherein you will be giving a separate account. So instead, what you're going to do is you're going to use the IAM or the identity and access management, using which we will be able to manage all the AWS users and what is the access that you should be giving them and what kind of services that they are interested to work. Based on that, you'll be giving the access. So identity and access management is the service in AWS using which you'll be creating different users and managing their access. Okay. In that way, now whatever the account that we have created initially for the testing purpose, right? Similarly, if you create an account in the AWS, that account by default will be called as the root account. The same way, like if you're logging into a machine as an administrator, you'll be logging in as a root, right? The same way, the account that we are going to create first using our payment option is what going to be called as a root account. Okay, and basically the root account will have all the privileges or all the administrative privileges and the access to all the services in the AWS. So that's the reason you're creating it as a root. Then whenever a new user that we are going to create in the AWS account, then by default, they won't be having any access permission. So what we have to do is we have to use this IAM and specify what is the user and what access that he should be having, so that we will be granting the permissions based on the users. Okay. Now, in IAM, what and all can you do? So in the IAM specifically, you'll be creating different kind of users, or you are going to create a group of users, and you are also going to set up certain policies on what has to be accessed and how it has to be accessed. And in case, if possible, you will also be assigned something called as a role. Okay, so this is how you're going to specifically create an account in AWS and give it to everyone. And make sure that whatever the regular activity that you're going to do, we will be doing it using the user account and not using the root account. Okay, so that is the main thing, where when we try to create an account in the AWS, that is the default root account, and from that, with respect to each individual, we will be creating a specific account, and the root account, that whatever we are going to have, will not be used for any kind of day-to-day activity. It is used only for the administrative purpose. Okay, now what you're going to do is, once you create a user, you have to assign a particular access to him, or we have to set up a policy through that he will be able to access certain resources in the AWS. Okay, so that now we will be using as a local account whatever you're going to create in the AWS, and using that only we will be doing all the regular tasks. Okay, how do I go to the IAM? So if you go to the services, and in the services, you can see security, identity, and compliance. In that, you'll be having all this options. So if you can go ahead and click on this. So it will be showing you certain options, wherein the first option or the best practice that you're trying to set up a root account, right, is to make sure that the security status of all these things is filled. So what exactly it is? Now, for every root account that you're going to create, there will be a key using which you can access. So make sure now, if you are logging into AWS as root, it should always be using the console, giving the username and password, not directly from the command prompt, just to avoid any issues. And then there is an option called activate MFA. MFA stands for multi-factor authentication. Now, it is just an additional layer of authentication where you will be trying to generate some kind of password that you need for your account using a scanner. So if you click on this and if you try to specify a device, then based on the device, it will be trying to configure, wherein so just like how you are going to scan, what you can do is you can scan for a particular user account and only then you will be able to allow it. So if you want to set up this, then you can set up the MFA or the multi-factor authentication, using which we will be able to log in using the password as well as the scanner, that whatever we have. Okay. Then once this too is done, again, in our practice, it is not mandatory, but it is a best practice to make sure you are giving a specific MFA or the multi-factor authentication for the account that you are going to log in as the root. And then whenever you want to create specific users, then you will be using this credit individual IAM users, and in that manage users. So either you can click and go from here, or you can click on this users on the left tab and it will be still working. Okay, so click on the manage users. So it is going to give you all the list of users that is available, so that when you are trying to set up AWS for a group, then you will be creating different usernames in the group and you will be giving them access, so that they will be connecting to the AWS using this account name only. So that way, if you want to create a new account, you can say add user and whatever the name that you want to give, let's say test user 01. Okay, and then now when you're creating it, so what kind of access that you want to give, that you will be choosing it in the AWS management console, where using this we will be able to set up what is the password and the complete details about each user that we are trying to create. So choose a particular one, and in that it is going to ask us what kind of password that you want to create for this. Is it something like a auto-generated password which we will give it to the user to log in whenever he needs, or you can actually have a custom password specifying what kind of password that you want to store, that you can give it in the the custom password. Okay, now in that, if a user is logging into the AWS for the first time using this username and password, now do you want to ask him to change the password, or do you want him to just go ahead and don't do anything? So based on this, if you click on this option, it will try to make sure that whenever the user tries to log in now using this username and password, it will try to ask him to enter a new password, which should be the overwriting the existing one for security purpose. So if you want to enable, you can just click this option and it will be enabled. Okay. Now, once you have created a user, the next thing is, by default, a user will not be having any permission. So based on what permissions that you give, he will be able to access the resources in the AWS. And for doing it, now you cannot directly apply a permission, because a permission will be in terms of policies. 2 to 3 permissions together can be grouped and we can create it as one policy. So that's how, when you want to specify access to a particular application, then you will be setting up a policy based on which whatever the particular access or the permission that you are granting it. Okay, so now if you want to know the list of policies that is available so that you can add to the user, then go ahead and click on the attach existing policies, so that it will be giving you all the policies that is available. And one among them, if you say administrator access, then it will be having all the permission, just like the root account. The user account that you're going to create will be having all the access to create a machine, to delete a machine, to configure many things like this. All of them will be available. And once it is done, go ahead and review and create a specific user account. Okay, so it's trying to say that this is the password that you have, and in case if you want to send, you can pretty much send as an email, so that this username and the password will be sent to you, so that you can keep a track of it. Okay. So this is the password that you have to give it to the specific user who will be using this password to connect to the AWS as this account. Okay. So you can see now we have a couple of user accounts which has been created. Now, what happens is when you're actually creating a username, and if you want to set a permission, you cannot keep creating separate accounts, and for that account you cannot keep giving individual permissions. Suppose if there are 100 people for whom you have to give the same access, then what we can do is we can actually group the user accounts in the AWS, so that if you assign a permission to the group, then whatever the users who are inside the group, they will also be getting the same permission. So that's how what we can do is think about creating a group and give the permission to the group, and whoever is part of that group, they will be able to get the same permission as the group. Okay. Then when you're actually creating a user account, you can also set up a policy where how exactly the password should be looking at. So do you want to have so many characters? Do you want to have the capitals in it? Or do you want to have some special characters? You can think about defining it specifically based on your organization's requirement. And then based on that, if the user is try to log in, then it will be asking him to first change the password specifically to the system what you have given. So that is how you can think about having a specific password for a account. Okay. So this is how generally it is going to work. So to just show you in the picture format, now let's take, there is one service called as S3 bucket. Now just like how we have a EC2 machine, now there is one more service again regardless of this. When a user is trying to basically work, that is you have created an account, and based on that account, if a user is trying to access a service, by default he will not be having access to anything else. So what we can do in this location is, rather than waiting, we will go ahead and we will specify a policy where based on the policy he will be able to access. So now specific to this service, we have one policy called S3 full access, where that will help him to work on this complete service. Okay. Same way, now let's say one more user has been added to the account, and now if you want to allow that person to work on the surface, by default he'll not be able. So once again, you're going to create a specific policy and attach it to the user. Based on that, he will be able to access the service. Okay. Now that is when, instead of specifying individually, because as you have more and more users, it will be complicated for us to set it up. So that is when, instead of setting up individually, what we can do is we can go ahead and create a group and attach all the users to the group. And that way, now if you're trying to set up a policy for the group, because as of now, if you create a group and add a user, it is the same thing where the group, if it is empty, then none of the people will be able to access it. But when you now set a policy for this group, then whatever the users who are part of this group will also be getting the same permission. Okay. And suppose, let's say if you simply want to remove one of the user from the group, then if that user tries to access, he will not be able to access it because he has not been assigned the permission directly, as well as he is also not part of this group which has the permission. So that's how it will be assigned to all the people who are as part of the group. Okay, so that's how you can try to segregate and group or form a group which will be having a particular users. So rather than giving individual permissions for every account, you can give it to the group, and whatever the users attach it to the group, they'll also be getting the same permissions or the policy. Okay, now In addition to the group, we also have something called as role. Now, what exactly is a role? So here, suppose this is what we saw, where you will create a group, add the users to it, and for the group, you will give a policy. Based on that, all the users who are part of the group will be able to access this particular resource. Now, what if from one resource that you have already attached a policy, if you want to connect to other resource, not like a direct user, but as a user, you are connecting to one service, and from this service, if you want to connect to another service, then you will not be able to work, because whatever the policy that you have set is only to access it. But from this, if you are trying to access something else, it will not be allowed. So that is when what we have to do is we have to create something called as a role, and then you will be assigning it to each of the services. So that way it will be always easier that the policy that you have attached will be for this particular group, whereas for the service you will be giving it as a role which will be having the permission to access it. Okay, now how do I do that? So if you go back now, we saw that how to add a new user, and for that user, if you want to give the permission, we saw, suppose after creating, if you want to add more permission, come here, and in this location, if you just simply say add permission, it'll again get you back to the same page where from here you can choose what exact access that you want. Okay, suppose if you don't know, you can search for a particular access, and based on that service you can allow the person to work. Okay, now in this further, let's say that you wanted to add a permission, you can choose one, and based on that he will be giving only that particular permission. So now under that user you can see he has two permissions and he is not part of the group or any group. So now instead of doing like this on each user, what we can do is simply create a group. Okay, so if you want to create a group, just go ahead and create a new group and give the name. And now what is the policy or the permissions that you want to attach for the group directly? Okay, so now you can choose it. Suppose let's say I want to apply these policies to this group, and in this group, suppose if you want to add a particular user, now you can add. Okay, so now let's go to the group, and in this group, as of now I don't have any people because I've just created a group. So here these are the permissions that it has, and now if I add a user to this, let's say this user, and what will happen, if you see there are two users, and those two users will also get this permission, because if you go back to this user, and now you can see in the permission along with this you are also getting these two, because you are being part of this group that you can see. And that is how, instead of directly attaching a particular policy, you can attach it to a group, and based on the group you can go ahead and give them the permissions through that. Getting it? On how you will be creating account and how is that you will be giving the access. So now when you are going to log in to the AWS, you will be giving them this user account and a password which is being given specifically, and using that only we will be working. And moreover, in the organization we will be not creating individual account, we will be having a common, just like how we are going to have a common build account for doing all the build activity, we will also be having a common service account, and that is what we will be using to create all the services or connect between the services. Getting it?